All right, today we're jumping into one of my absolute favorite topics, scientific paradoxes. Those moments where reality just seems to make no sense. And right there, in that confusion, we find something completely new about how the universe works. Just think about that for a second. We expect science to give us these nice, neat, logical answers. But what happens when what we see completely contradicts a theory we thought was rock solid? Well, that's where things get really interesting. Okay, so let's get into it. The first thing you have to understand is that for a scientist, a paradox isn't some kind of dead end. No, it's a puzzle. It's like a big flashing neon sign that points to a gap in our knowledge. So, what are we really talking about when we say scientific paradox? It's pretty simple, actually. It's when we observe something, maybe in an experiment, maybe just a pattern out in the world, that, according to our current rulebook of science, just shouldn't be happening. It's a wait, that can't be right moment that demands an explanation. I love this way of thinking about it. A paradox isn't a mistake we need to scrub away. It's an invitation. It's a little hidden door that says, hey, there's something deeper and way more complex over here. These paradoxes force us, they compel us to rethink everything and build better, more accurate theories. Let's kick things off with a paradox that's really close to home. It's about our own bodies. It's sometimes called the morbidity-mortality paradox or the gender paradox, and it is a genuine head-scratcher. So here's the contradiction, and it's a big one. For centuries, we've had data showing that women, on average, tend to report more illnesses throughout their lives. Colds, chronic conditions, you name it. And yet, they consistently live longer than men. Now that just doesn't seem to add up, right? More sickness should mean a shorter life. It doesn't. So how do we even begin to solve this puzzle? Well, researchers have come up with what they call a biopsychosocial model. It just means we have to look at it from a few different angles at once. First, there's biology. Things like having two X chromosomes might offer some genetic protection, and hormones like estrogen seem to have a protective effect on the heart. Then you've got behavior. Historically, men have shown higher rates of things like smoking, drinking, and general risk-taking. And finally, there are social factors. For instance, women are often more likely to go see a doctor when something feels wrong. See, it's not one thing, it's this whole complex web of factors. And the big discovery this paradox led to is that it's pushing us away from a one-size-fits-all approach to medicine and towards a future where healthcare is personalized and sex-aware. Okay, let's zoom out now, way out, from the human body to a puzzle at the very core of evolution. Because if you think about it, if natural selection is all about passing on your genes as efficiently as possible, then sexual reproduction presents a huge, glaring paradox. Let's just walk through the raw numbers here. An asexual organism, think of a bacteria just splitting in two, it passes on 100% of its genes. Easy. But if you reproduce sexually, you only pass on half because you have to mix your DNA with a partner. From a pure accounting standpoint, that's a 50% loss every single generation. It's what they call the twofold cost. Asexuals should be winning this race hands down. So, why is pretty much everything you see, including us, the product of sex? And here's the twist. It turns out we might have been asking the wrong question all along. Maybe it's not about which method is fitter in a short-term race. Maybe the real question is, which system is more stable and resilient over thousands and thousands of years? The answer seems to be all about adaptability. You see, sexual species can sense what's going on in their environment and change their behavior, like, say, being pickier about a mate when times are tough. This ability to adapt, to constantly shuffle the genetic deck, creates incredible diversity. And that diversity makes the whole population so much more robust, so much more able to handle whatever the world throws at it that it completely outweighs that initial 50% cost. It's an amazing idea, right? That in the long game of evolution, flexibility beats brute force efficiency every time. Okay, for our last paradox, we're going to scale up one more time to the level of entire ecosystems. This one is a classic in ecology, and it takes a really simple, intuitive idea and just flips it completely on its head. This is known as the paradox of enrichment. It asks a simple question. What happens when you add more food to a simple predator-prey system, like, say, hawks and rabbits? What do you think would happen? Logically, your gut tells you more food for the rabbits means more rabbits, which means more food for the hawks, and the whole system should be booming and stable, right? But back in the 70s, the mathematical models predicted the exact opposite. If you enrich the system too much, it could cause these wild population swings that were so extreme they'd end up driving one or both species to extinction, a total collapse. This quote from the scientist who first described it really drives home how serious this was. It was a huge warning to us. Our best intentions, like trying to boost a fish population by adding nutrients to a lake, could actually destroy the very thing we were trying to help. But that raises another question. If the math is right, why don't we see ecosystems collapsing all the time in the real world?
Well, it's because reality, once again, is so much messier and more complex than a simple model. Nature has all these built-in safety nets. For example, maybe there are other types of prey around that are harder to catch, acting as a buffer. Or maybe the prey develops defenses when there are a lot of them. The predators might be limited by their own diseases. And on top of all that, the real world isn't a perfect, uniform lab. It's patchy, it's chaotic, and all that messiness actually adds friction that keeps the whole system from just spiraling out of control.
So, after looking at our own bodies, at evolution, and at entire ecosystems, what's the big takeaway here? What do these incredible contradictions really teach us?
I think it boils down to this. Paradoxes are nature's ultimate fact checkers. A paradox is like the universe holding up our scientific map of the world and pointing to a spot and saying, hey, you got this part wrong. It shows us our understanding is incomplete.
And that's their real magic. They don't just point out the flaw, they give us the clues and the drive to fix it. Every single paradox that gets solved, from women's health to why ecosystems don't collapse, leaves us with a more accurate, more nuanced, and frankly, a more beautiful map of reality.
And that leaves us with this final thought. The entire history of science is just a long story of shattered assumptions. The things we've talked about today were once total mysteries. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What idea that we all accept as true today is just waiting for the right paradox to come along and shatter, leading us to our next great discovery?